The ACC has been a punching bag outside of Clemson, South Carolina. They have been a national punching bag for a little while now. And I want to be perfectly clear. They deserve it. That is a deserved reputation. The conference outside of Clemson has been a wet bag of trash for quite a while now. Inexplicably so, but they've been just flaming hot garbage for a little while. And I think you deserve to be criticized just as, okay, we're done with the criticism. That was ripping the scab or ripping the Band-Aid off the scab. Now let's talk about the future a little bit. And I'm not talking about 2024. 2020, starting in 2020 and beyond. We know one thing at least. We know teams and programs don't just lie down forever and just let you beat on them, even though it may appear that way because things move very slowly to the naked eye. But things are always evolving. So teams aren't just going to sit still. Like when Nick Saban, Alabama came in and they dominated for a couple of years, people didn't sit still. There was a little more rapid adjustment in the SEC than there has been in the ACC to Clemson, but people don't sit still. Remember when Southern Cal was dominating in the early 2000s? Remember how long it looked like it was going to take anything to derail them? And a few years later, what's happening? So Clemson's not going to continue to dominate forever. That's not going to happen. But the questions are, do they derail themselves? Does something pop up internally? Does a challenger or multiple challengers, do they pop up in the ACC? So I wanted to talk about the potential of the latter happening here. They won't be down forever, will the ACC? But the question, if that's true, is who will it be that pops up? I still believe, as much as people are bullish on some other programs, maybe for good reason, I still believe that this effort's got to start in the state of Florida. And the reason I believe the effort's got to start in the state of Florida is twofold. Think about this with me. If Virginia Tech, if we snapped our fingers today, and Virginia Tech was a top 10 program, or if we snapped our fingers today and North Carolina is just a top 10 program, that's great, and that could pose a challenge to Clemson, but that's a one-fold challenge. I'm focused on the state of Florida, and I've talked about this for well over a year now. I'm focused on that state and Miami and Florida State being in that state and residents of the ACC because they could present a twofold problem. If you have a drastically improved product at Miami, or if you have a drastically improved product at Florida State, or ideally if you got it at both, then of course, on the field, in that season, they're going to challenge Clemson. That's not all that's happening. Clemson goes to Florida for a ton of talent. They don't go to Virginia for a ton of talent. They go south. They know where to look. And so two things could happen. Number one, if you got FSU and or Miami rolling, not only do you start to challenge Clemson on the field, but maybe you keep 2 or 3 kids per cycle, per program home that maybe would have looked elsewhere, maybe would have gone to Clemson. And so what does that do? Maybe nothing, or maybe it's the difference in a game-deciding touchdown 2 years from now. Point is, every time that you see Clemson come into the state of Florida, or Ohio State or Alabama, but we're talking about the ACC, and they take one of those kids, if you're like me, you think back and you say, man, that would have been crazy to envision a generation ago. Kids, I mean, premier now, high 4, 5-star caliber talent, leaving the state of Florida to go to Clemson? No knock on Clemson. It just, not very many kids were throwing up the deuces to Miami and Florida State and opting for Clemson. But this is 2020. This is today. So that's the reason why I think it starts in the state of Florida. As for those programs, I don't know how you could have drawn any definitive conclusion on Mike Norvell. I understand optimism. I get all that. But very few people are openly pessimistic about a new head coach and a new regime before they've played a game. So Mike Norvell hasn't played a game, so of course there's optimism about him. I'm not saying I have anything to take away from that. What I'm saying is I'm in the remains to be seen camp on Mike Norvell. I think that's the only place you can be, really. We're not talking about a guy who hopefully can get you back to a nice bowl game. Remember the conversation we're having here? We're talking about potentially challenging Clemson. So you got that. But at Miami, it's a different story because Miami, they're now a couple of years in. At Miami, they've already adjusted to what didn't work. Manny Diaz, of course, bringing in a high-profile transfer at quarterback in King. He brought in a new offensive coordinator. He hit the dump button, which I believe in doing. I mean, you got to have patience, but you also have to understand principle and understand when something's not working, and you got to be able to cut it loose. And Manny Diaz cut a lot of stuff loose after last year and brought some transfers in. And, I mean, they're ready to win this year, they think. Now, they still got holes on that roster. They still got big question marks on that roster, but they're good enough to win this year. And my point is, I'm willing to buy stock in the future of Miami. And while I could buy stock in the University or FSU, I had someone call it FSU, University of FSU the other day. I had someone call it that. And I shook my head. I knew what you would think about it, but I shook my head. I kept on moving. I'd love to buy stock in FSU too. I just don't know yet. That's the whole way the stock market's played, I know. But collectivism is something that a lot of people kind of try and throw at you. And collectivism's not going to get it done, guys. You can't have a bunch of pretty good teams and plan to knock off Clemson. It'd be great to have a conference full of pretty good to very good teams for my sake, because that would make the conference more entertaining. But there's some people who believe in Justin Fuente and Virginia Tech. Like I said with Florida State, like I said with Miami, Virginia is a program I wouldn't mind buying stock in at all. Louisville surprised a lot of people last year, but here's the thing. If they all just get to a level of pretty good, good to pretty good, that's great for the ACC, and that's great for the conversation we're having here. It's great for the TV product. Like, there's a lot of good that comes from that. But collectivism's not knocking Clemson off. You could have a lot of pretty good teams, and Clemson could run through all of them. Could. Now, it's a tougher challenge. You got to bring at least your B to B plus game every week. You can't be skating through with a C plus effort and still win 24-13. But collectivism, I don't think, is the key to taking out Clemson. Collectivism just allows Clemson to lose a game and have an excuse to because their strength of schedule has improved enough. So that's what collectivism would do. Someone out of that group, I'm all for collectivism. I'm all for collectively the tide rising in the ACC. But in the meantime, Pitt, I left them off the list a second ago. Pitt, Virginia Tech, one of the Florida schools, Louisville, like someone's got to emerge as a legit top 6, top 7 college football playoff contender. And of course, right now, we would not refer to any of the other teams. North Carolina, I left them off the list. You can see, you know what? Let me responsibly do this. Pitt, Virginia Tech, Louisville, North Carolina, all those teams, Florida State, Miami, those are teams who, Virginia, you could reasonably look at and say, things are trending up there. If you were to point an arrow, red for down or green for up, you'd have a lot more green arrows than you would red arrows there. What does it result in? What does it, 2 years, 3 years from now, when we're looking at this, what does that result in? Who can be great? That's all I care about. Who can be great? And to be honest with you, as much as I just talked about Miami, I'm not so sure North Carolina wouldn't be my pick there. If I had to pick a team, if you told me someone not named Clemson is going to be in the college football playoff from the ACC 2 years from now, and let's say Notre Dame is independent again, I'd pick North Carolina. They're good at quarterback already. They have got their future quarterback already committed and coming in. They have recruited very well. They have identified where they need to upgrade, and they're in the process of doing that. They got a really good vision. They've got a very good not figurehead, that's insulting. A nice CEO type approach by Mac Brown as their head coach. They've got a good staff in place. They are killing it recruiting in state, and North Carolina is a pretty darn good state to recruit in at a high level. That'd be my pick. Wouldn't shock me, to be honest with you, if either of the Florida schools end up fitting that description. I'd be pleasantly surprised if it were Pat Narduzzi at Pitt. I'd be, I'm still as far out on Justin Fuente and Virginia Tech as anyone is. I'm totally baffled by what the future will be there. I have no educated guess on that. Not even an educated guess. That's the worst kind of analyst in existence. But that's what's up in the ACC right now.